Welcome to episode 8 of the ReAutomated podcast. Today we have Graham MacPherson, CEO and co-founder of Go Fast Campers. Go Fast Campers is a manufacturer of truck bed rooftop tents for trucks located in Montana. They are a small business with 65 employees, founded in 2017, and their motto is cozy, fast, and reliable. Graham, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris.
So Graham, what is Go Fast Campers and how did you get the inspiration to co-found this company?
Yeah, so grew up going down to Mexico a lot, watching off-road racing as a kid. My family has a long history in off-road racing. And being able to put something on the back of your truck that wasn't going to fall apart, wasn't going to end up in the landfill, and also allowed us to drive really fast, thus the name Go Fast, really was the design parameters, more or less, and building something that was actually truly affordable for consumers that wouldn't end up in the landfill was kind of the big hard part of this project.
Very cool. So you're going down to Mexico, you said, to race. I think I understand that you're a Baja truck racer, or maybe your family was in the past. Is that true?
So my family was. Yes. My grandpa helped start SCORE, which is the founding governing body of Baja racing. My dad raced Baja forever, so we kind of have a long lineage of honestly establishing a lot of that stuff down there.
And that taught you a little bit about quality, race car parts, kind of what it is to have machines that are very, very high quality and running top of the line.
Absolutely. Yeah. The engineering is pretty unmatched there because if it doesn't work well, it will break.
So what's your background that led to, kind of your experience before starting Baja or Go Fast?
Yeah. So I went to school for mechanical engineering for my undergrad and worked in offshore oil and gas in West Africa, actually for a little while, doing environmental solutions in Equatorial Guinea. Realized that the only way that the world would become a better place would be by creating real value and real solutions that didn't cost more money, because I was watching what was happening over in EG and what was happening in the rest of the world that can't afford the luxury of taking care of the planet, and realized that incentivizing better living through better technology is the best way that we can actually change the world for the better. And after that, went back to school to look at doing my graduate degree in kind of electrical engineering, mechatronics, did some of the prep for that graduate program, and then eventually ended up dropping out to go pursue building trucks.
Cool. Yeah, people can't afford the luxury of paying for improvements in the climate without incentives, right?
Exactly.
Cool. So Go Fast Campers had a successful crowdfunded and entrepreneurial launch, but you have faced production woes in the beginning. What were some of the challenges that you were facing, and how'd you navigate them?
Yeah, so my co-founder, Wiley Davis, had a real mindset towards vertical integration early on, which was pretty daunting when none of us knew how to sew, and a huge component of our product is textiles. The entire top 10 assembly is a shelter that has to be waterproof, has to be wind resistant, has to have all of these pretty challenging design parameters for a 4-season shelter. And we had very, very, very little experience in soft goods because we both came from mechanical engineering design. And starting with vertical integration, it took a long time for us to establish the ability to have any significant throughput. And the way that we marketed, and honestly, the product positioning at the timing, everything happened. The thing went like a wildfire, sold and booked out for 2 years almost immediately.
Did you go viral or something like that? How did that happen in the beginning?
Yeah, so we got shared on a bunch of big online platforms like Outside Magazine and Uncrate and kind of all the big trending newsletter emails that were pretty pervasive in 2017. And just the demand went through the roof. The value was there. The product was there. The market was there. And then it was really a struggle to figure out how do we actually make these things at scale, because we weren't using contract manufacturers. We weren't jobbing this out. We weren't bringing in shipping containers of product.
Why did you choose to go vertical integrated from the very beginning? I can imagine that was a kind of a risky decision to start with. But does that relate back to that idea of, cutting costs in the end to make it affordable for, made in the USA products? Or what was the decision around the vertical integration?
I think the real driving decision behind the vertical integration was building competency. And the one thing that people don't realize is that if you don't make something yourself, it's really hard to actually make it better. So if you job everything out to Asia, if you job everything out to any other country or honestly, even to a contract manufacturing facility in your own town that you don't fully understand the manufacturing process, how are you going to be able to improve your product if you don't understand design for manufacturability? And I think that that's a huge problem that a lot of domestic businesses face, where it doesn't allow for innovation. And we work in a very competitive marketplace that's constantly evolving. Trucks are constantly evolving, and our SKU count is just astronomically high because we tailor products specifically to fit certain vehicles. And the ability to react quickly in-house and to innovate quickly in-house was really the driving push behind the vertical integration. And like you said earlier, there's a ton of tangential benefits that cutting out the middleman, going direct to consumer, being able to provide really great value without compromising where product's made or how good the product is another huge benefit.
Great. So you guys have one of the more fascinating case studies of collaborative automation I've ever seen. I think it's really cool. Can you talk a little bit about? I understand that your motto is that you not only want to create awesome products, but also a badass manufacturing company. So can you talk a little bit about what your manufacturing approach is? I've read that you kind of are inspired by Toyota, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Go Fast Campers is a brand, and we are direct to consumer. We're not B2B. So we're really focusing on telling our story well to our consumer. And our product really has to uphold that promise that our brand makes to the consumer. When you have the balance of a great brand and a great product, that's how you have a long-lasting, enduring business that really has massive market reach. So companies like Sitka Hunting Gear, like Yeti Cooler, they really not only have a great brand, but they have a product that backs that up. And in order for us to back up our product well, the complexity of our product requires really, really competent manufacturing. It's ultra lightweight. It's on the back of a vehicle. It's constantly experiencing salt spray environment. It's getting hammered by washboard roads. We've had customers get into a car accident and the camper's fine, but the car's totaled. Like, there's just a lot of really, really gnarly inputs that go into the driving experience. And it's a really hard use case for anything, but especially including like anodized metals, galvanic corrosion, fabric. Fabric doesn't like being on a highway going 80 miles an hour in the salt. So really designing for those things requires having a really robust and competent manufacturing operation. And also, like we said earlier, that vertical integration is fundamental to our ability to add value to the end user and still manufacture things in a way that we're proud of, which is the whole reason why we're doing this, right? The whole reason we want to do this is to create real jobs, create real economy, and really bring back domestic manufacturing in a way that doesn't have to be compromised.
That's an awesome message. Yeah, for sure. So how has automation played a role in making this possible?
Yeah, so automation really, in hindsight, has been everything in a lot of ways for our ability to succeed as a business. There was a little bit of, if you build it, they will come early on, integrating the UR arms into the DT1s, and honestly, automation across our entire business line, whether it's the customer service team using Zapier to connect Airtable to kind of get a rig a backend CRM, or it's UR cobots running our vertical milling machines. What really made a huge difference was right before COVID. So basically New Year's 2020, January 1st, we did a company-wide announcement that we were raising our base pay from about $13 to $14 an hour up to $25. And then what enabled that? Yeah. So what enabled that was using automation tools and the ability to create more value in core areas of our company that could be distributed among everyone else at the business while we seek to automate more and more work that can incentivize higher pay. And at the time in 2020, $25 in our area was a lot of money. And we quickly found out that became the market rate during COVID. And what's really interesting.
Thank God you did it then. Yeah,
exactly. And it's really like the best thing to come out of COVID was the ability to empower employees to understand like what a living wage means and the ability to kind of demand a living wage in a lot of ways. Because in this country, making $12 or $13 an hour, it's tough. And automation enabled us to get there. And thankfully we got there before before the market got there. And then it allowed us to be stable without taking those huge costs. Because so many businesses that we talk to were like, how are you finding staff? And it's like, we'll just pay them better. And we realized that we can use automation tools to pay our employees better. Our employees care more. They want to make sure that they're holding everybody else accountable. It requires less management. You can bring on the best people, and it's a win-win. And it's kind of one of those scary leaps of faith as a business owner, where it's like, I'm worried about paying them more money, but in reality, now we're a family, now we're a team. When before they were just showing up to get paid, and they're just like looking for the next opportunity, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. So the cost savings on automation, as well as like kind of the sexiness of it, helped you attract better quality, more talented individuals that you can afford to pay more.
Totally. And one other thing that it does is allows us to take more risk, especially like the automation systems in our like machine shop, because we have the ability to run lights out there. So being able to build more product and more scale without bringing on more people, really our big thing here is how do we fluctuate to meet market demand without having to bring on staff that comes and goes, right? We don't want to trade jobs and take them away, create jobs and take them away. We want to create careers, not jobs. And using automation to kind of balance that flux, where it's like, hey, this machine can kind of run lights out for a bit, or we can bring on one person and have way more efficiency than we would if we had to have like 4 people come in, and then if things slow down, we get rid of 4 people. So really enabling us to run our business in a way that takes better care of our employees has been a massive, massive benefit of automation.
Very good. Awesome. And to that point, how has the day-to-day of the actual roles and responsibilities of your employees changed now that you have automation such a key part of your manufacturing?
I think one of the misunderstandings from a lot of manufacturing businesses and even, but really the public misunderstanding of automation is that it requires somebody that's like a quantitative physicist to run a UR cobot. And it's just not true. Like, if you went to go sit at a CNC machine and load it and unload it and load it and unload it, especially the small billet parts all day, that's kind of a gnarly job. It's not like, it's great if you love podcasts, but it's not a super fulfilling job necessarily. So being able to have a cobot that you oversee, humans are great at really understanding if something's broken in a way that a robot never will be good. And that ability for pattern recognition, that ability to improve efficiency, that ability to look around the space and figure out what else can be done to make this better. Like, that's what we found for our employees, is being able to bring people on and elevate their job. And honestly, it's the same people that would have been loading and unloading the machine. It's just giving them a better career path. And also they're creating way more value for the business. So being able to have that balance of creating more value and really focusing on craftsmanship type work is I think super fulfilling.
Very cool. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about the way that you do on the fly changes. I think that's really cool. If anyone of our listeners gets a chance to watch the Go Fast Campers case study, additional videos as well, there's a lot of other kind of content out there around Go Fast Campers. You guys have really created a unique way of doing production changes almost on the fly, and it propagates kind of all the way down the value chain from automation to the machining center itself. So can you just spend a couple of minutes talking about what that on the fly change is and how you developed it?
Yeah. So early on, we had zero institutional knowledge of how well our product would work. So when you create a product in a new category for the first time, or you create a different way to make a product that's interesting and novel, which is a great thing to do domestically, you don't necessarily have a lot of understanding of failure modalities. And being able to make a lot of our parts out of billet machine components at costs that are honestly pretty comparable to casting and forgings once you consider the tooling costs and all these fixed costs that go into it, it's amazing to use machine components because we can make changes and we can make iterative changes. Even if the consumer doesn't see it, an example would be something like, in the Pacific Northwest, the rain conditions are very different than they'd be for our consumer than they are in Montana or California. So when we do drainage channels for water management that comes out of a billet machine component, we don't realize that when you have 16 hours of nonstop driving rain, the surface tension and maybe a little bit of moss in the Pacific Northwest collecting in one of the drainage channels doesn't allow the tent to drain correctly. So being able to enlarge that hole in a way that you might not be able to with fixed tooling and make those constant little tweaks really helped us get to a point where we were able to become more confident in what we were manufacturing without costing us all of the money in the world to constantly change forgings, castings, constantly change all these different components. So really this ability for modularity while we're learning right alongside the customer as a startup was really fundamental, not only in the success of our customer base, and it was really the happiness of our consumer and our reputation in the category. So being able to make those on the fly iterative changes was, especially early on, was really, really helpful.
Yeah. So you're able to essentially update the CAD drawings or whatever it is and push that out to both the machine and also have the robot understand how the part may have changed on the fly.
Exactly. And then what's really neat is because that process is so lean, we can work on a retroactively or a retrofittable solution for the user who's already having the problem. So we might even make a change moving forward that's different enough that we want to actually change the physical part that won't necessarily fit the previous camper, but we can build a specific solution for a customer group that we have recorded that we know needs a better solution. So it's you'd never want to do a production run of 20 cast components to help a couple customers out, right? You're going to eat the whole camper cost and build them a new one. Whereas we can build one individual component that gets sent back out to a niche of customers. And I think that really early on, as we developed that knowledge, was huge. And obviously it's less so now. But the ability to tweak and make changes to our product moving forward and to prototype and try things really quickly has also been huge, because we can come up with like a full new production prototype quickly, and having those automation tools to help enable that and the lean manufacturing processes is basically anything we can do to avoid fixed tooling as long as it's within reason of price.
You said it's less so now because your designs have kind of stabilized. You figured out a lot of those learnings along the way, right?
Yep. Yeah, we learned a lot in the first 5,000 campers. And building a system that basically building those camper components has really helped us build that institutional knowledge that drives our decision making moving forward. And so we have those problems a lot less now, which is great.
What kind of tools, just like quickly, what kind of tools do you use to keep track of all of these massive amounts of forward and backward revisions and kind of all that?
Yeah, so we use a production and almost like a CRM tool that we built on a backbone of Airtable. So nobody's building, Airtable is amazing. If you don't use it and you're using Google Sheets right now in your manufacturing or Excel, switch now. This is not a sponsored message. Airtable is incredible. So what we've been able to do is build a online database that is linked directly to Fusion 360, which is the CAD software that we use. And we have a really talented team member that builds a lot of backend Python scripts to go back and forth between the software tools, and can kind of log and save changes of CAD files at every iteration. So if a unit number 3277 needs a new upright because a tree fell on their camper and they're looking to rebuild it, we can just machine that part directly. So as we make those changes, your point is very, very well taken. The library is incredibly important, because if you are making changes and you want to support an existing customer, it's really, really hard if you don't know what they have.
Yeah, for sure. We had our last episode, we had the founder and CEO of a company called Vention on, and they're like an online kind of CAD. So we were talking a lot about CAD, and it's like the crux of their technology when they first started was figuring out that revision control. When you're doing like an online cloud kind of solution, it just, the permutations become crazy. So I respect the complexity behind all that stuff. Totally.
And cloud-based CAD and cloud-based storage has been huge, because just being able to have everything live on the internet is, I mean, we don't have to have some giant server in an air-conditioned room to manage all this stuff.
Yeah. So switching back to some of your ethos and pathos here. So when I visited your LinkedIn profile, it says we can't afford to have made in the USA be a luxury, which is a notion you've also reinforced with previous interviews. So why is this important to you? And how do you make an American customer choose US wares if there are usually cheaper foreign alternatives?
Yeah. So that's the whole point, right? We can't make the customer choose because they can't afford to choose. If they can, that's great. But on the whole, we're not going to make a difference if they have to compromise. And there's no reason that a consumer should have to compromise. And automation tools, the ability to sell direct has all been so instrumental in our ability to create real value for the end user that things like the waste of shipping through containers and inventory management and forecasting, all the headaches around that, the lead times, the compromises made to product for ease of shipping and ease of distribution, ease of forecasting. Building things domestically, whether it's USA made, whether it's Denmark made, whether it's anywhere in the world made, Brazil made, building something for your market in the place your market lives is so critical for building back the economy. And this actually goes way deeper into a narrative around how is value created in the world. And there's three ways to create value. You can farm it, you can mine it, and you can manufacture it. We choose the manufacturing path. One of the biggest issues that we're seeing in the world right now is the consolidation of power, which is really the consolidation of value. So if you have something of value, you have the ability to be represented politically. And if you have no value, you have no representation. And right now, America, specifically the United States, is built largely on a service industry. And that service industry doesn't represent value, it services value. So bringing domestic manufacturing back builds this amazing opportunity to distribute value. And what we want to do is help, as much as we can, help other businesses really achieve that distributed value, because that's how we're going to get better representation of everybody back into this country. So, and I think that's important everywhere. I think that's important in every country. So it's not this like completely patriotic initiative, although there is a component of that. It's really, how do we have our employees well represented? And who better than the employees to represent themselves by creating value directly, right? So I think that can be done in a capitalist way. It doesn't have to be like some socialist concept, but really we need to hold manufacturing to a higher standard and actually make things here. And the thing is nobody will care if your product is too expensive. And nobody cares about made in USA if it's only like Etsy little products on the online marketplace that are like leather soft goods.
Yeah. They have to be real things. That's really interesting, Graham. So when's the book coming out on all this? So you have some deep thoughts on all that.
Oh man, I don't know. We're busy making campers.
I've talked to the CEO of Robotique, who is a company that works a lot with Universal Robots, and he wrote a book called Lean Robotics, which I love. I think it's a great book for anyone who's looking to start automation. And when he was writing that book, one of the things I asked him was, how do you find the time to write a book? And he said, I did 4 hours a day, 4 days a week for 4 months.
Wow.
And that was it.
That actually sounds
that's what it took.
Fast.
That's what it took, but it's like 4 hours a day of concentrated effort is a lot, right? But that's what it took. So that's interesting. I'll look forward to your book on that, Graham. And it is interesting. It reminds me of lean manufacturing and lean robotics in some ways, talking about value creation. True value creation in lean manufacturing terms is adding or subtracting from the actual good or service. It's not moving it around, right? So I think to your point about, farming, mining, and manufacturing, those are creating value by creating goods, right? And you're right, around the service industry, it's essentially moving things around, right?
Exactly.
So
you're servicing somebody that's making goods, and that's just like, that is the way it is.
Yeah. Deep stuff. Cool. Love it. So what would you recommend for small or medium-sized enterprises that are considering automation? What advice would you give them based on your experience here at GoFast?
My advice would be bringing it in-house and bringing that into your team, because you're going to find out pretty quickly that if you do the integration yourself, that those people will hold the entire organization to that standard, and everyone else will see that. Your customer service team will start to look at automation for instance, our soft good team looks at automation, it elevates the entire business. And when you hire it out to integrators, which isn't necessarily like a bad way to start, you just don't have the competency to continually iterate. But we're obviously biased towards vertical integration in every area of our business.
Yeah.
Either way, though, like even if you do hire an integrator, the cobot interfaces are so much easier than everybody makes it out to be, and it's such a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had a lot of different guests on this podcast now, and the integrators say to start with an integrator. Other people say to try and foster your own like advanced manufacturing team. I think it seems to be that the consensus is it depends on how much risk you're willing to take early on. Like how much risk are you adopting by choosing to do it yourself versus having an integrator do it? For people that maybe don't have an engineering background like you, maybe it's good to watch them have an integrator or have them watch an integrator do an install and kind of conceptualize this stuff. But if you are familiar with the technology, maybe jump into it, right?
I mean, even if you aren't familiar with the technology, there's a lot of young and hungry, smart engineers coming out of school that love robotics. I mean, programs like First Robotics have really brought that into a normal culture. And I'd say if you're going to hire an integrator to install your first Fanuc arm, like that's a industrial robot, sure. Like definitely hire an integrator for that if you have no experience in it. That's a terrifying integration. We've done that before. And we did it ourselves. It was very hard. But like for a UR arm, I mean, there's forums, there's YouTube channels, there's all sorts of stuff to learn about how to do that yourself. And the cost is relatively low to buy the equipment and to learn. That said, like I'd say whether you choose an integrator, whether you do it yourself, just make that decision with intentionality and just don't do it out of convenience. So really choose what path you want to go down because it is important.
Yeah. And what would you budget for time, for example, if you're going to do it yourself and you're going to throw, a young, smart person at a robot and ask them to, for example, automate a CNC machine? What would you budget for them to figure it out and just kind of do it? I'm just trying to compare that versus, the speed of implementation of like an integrator for maybe your first one, for example. Right.
Yeah, totally. I think it all depends on everything depends on the process. That's like that. I mean, when we integrated a full industrial robot, like a Fanuc arm that did a self-piercing riveter to do the assembly on all of our panels, it was a full-time guy for about a year and a half, and with not a ton of experience in that area, but that was a huge undertaking and incredibly expensive, and it took a year and a half.
Yeah.
I think I've seen a lot of success with local businesses working together. Ideally, somebody already is using integration like this, and then it can be pretty fast. And I think that camaraderie in domestic manufacturing is super important. So I'd say if you were on a desert island and had no friends and had no experience at all, like maybe talk to an integrator that hopefully wants to help you and wants to help you understand the process. But if you can go talk to another job shop that already has this in, or another manufacturer that's already using these tools, I think there's a lot of efficiency that can be gained, and you could save a huge percentage of your time by just learning from other people who are probably going to be happy to teach you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was a recurring theme in our first episode with Ben Armstrong. He's a social scientist from MIT, and he studied like incredible amounts of data across the United States. And there's like certain hubs around the United States where the network effect really helps to foster adoption, and it's like, two firms across the street from each other maybe are not competitors, but they would be happy to share their lessons learned and their best practices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. All right, last question before we jump into rapid fire questions. Looking towards the future, how do you see automation evolving in your industry, and what role do you think it'll play at Go Fast Campers?
Furthering automation across all of our divisions is really the next frontier. We have a very good machine shop right now. It's relatively advanced in terms of automation practices, but there's a few areas domestically that are very behind in automation just in general. So things like fabric and soft goods, there's a huge opportunity there. Textiles, obviously the fixturing problem there is a lot different than what it is with a little piece of billet. But really, employing automation across all of our areas so that we can continue to pay more as the cost of living continues to go up is huge. And we still want to create value for the customer. So you're kind of being pulled two different ways, right? You want to take care of your team and have them know that they have a solid career path with you and that they have potential for growth and expansion. And you also want to take care of the customer and provide value. So you're the business owners between a little bit of a rock and a hard place, but we have a lot of solace in the fact that direct-to-consumer businesses have never been easier. All the automation tools of even, I mean, you could, in a lot of ways, you could consider Shopify and all that stuff. That would have been really hard 15 years ago. So the ability for businesses to cut out distribution and sell direct-to-consumer, I mean, there's 25, 30 points in those industries right there. Where
especially for consumer business, like B2C businesses, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, B2B is a little different. But again, automation is a rising tide that lifts all boats, and the lowered cost of automation is huge. Whether it's a UR cobot costing half of a salary or a Shopify costing $20 a month. It's not that hard to do this stuff now in a way that it was very, very hard to do 15 years ago.
Yeah. To your point about textiles and soft goods, I'm very careful and cognizant to avoid blatant AI hype, but we've had a couple experts here on the podcast, and I do think that artificial intelligence and machine learning will help with handling soft goods in the future for robotics. I think it's a tough problem right now because of the lack of fixturing and rigidity. So as robots become a little bit more robust on the edge cases with AI, I think that'll help out at least to handle soft goods and things like that.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, vision is such a huge part of that, and feel and all those different things that go into something that stretches and drapes as opposed to something that just gets a G code applied to it.
Yeah, just gets a point in space. Yeah, very good. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Graham. All right, let's move into the rapid fire questions. So these are truly rapid fire, hot takes, fast as you can think of them. Just spit them out, okay? So what book are you currently reading?
Reading Good to Great. Yeah, working on learning more about what makes a great organization that has lasting endurance and better corporate governance structures.
Awesome. That is a famous book. I do recommend it to anyone who hasn't read that before. So that's a good choice. Okay, question number 2. You're going to a deserted island. You mentioned it earlier. But this time, you get to choose which truck or RV you're going to bring. Which one are you bringing?
Probably a Rivian, because it's a gigantic battery. And as long as I have solar panels, I'll at least have some sort of power solution once, as opposed to internal combustion where the gas would run out.
Yeah. That's a modern next level play. I did not expect that. I was expecting like a Land Cruiser or something like that, but that's cool. Love it.
Land Cruiser would be cooler for like 25 miles.
Until an axle breaks and then you're screwed. Yeah. You're not bringing one of your Baja. You're not going to bring a Baja truck though? No?
I think on a deserted island, gasoline is hard to come by.
That's true. All right. Number 3, best place to camp in the United States.
Montana. It's a short season up in the summertime up here, but the lack of crowds and the amazing expanses of just wide open terrain is pretty hard to beat. Montana and a little bit of Wyoming too.
Yeah, you're a little biased, but I can totally understand that. I'm a Boston guy myself, and Tom Brady has a pretty big estate out there in Montana. So if it's good enough for him, it's probably good enough for me.
I hope so. Yeah.
Number 4, what tool or gadget would you never leave home without, especially if you're going to go outdoors?
Montana Knife Company knives, fixed blade knives. They've got a great product, vertically integrated over in Missoula, Montana. Good friends, doing some really cool stuff, kind of upsetting the knife industry in a similar way to what we're doing here at GFC.
Awesome. Love it. Cool. And number 5, who would you like to hear on this podcast in the future?
A friend of mine, Braden Ball, who's working on manufacturing back-end software to help small businesses understand or basically build better manufacturing systems, because so many of these, including us, historically, small businesses have been just piecing together kind of half-ready solutions, and that's a really hard way to run your business off of a bunch of Google Sheets or Excel tables.
Cool. And one last bonus question. Where can we go to follow you, Graham?
At GFC_USA on Instagram. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn as well. So those are probably the best avenues. Our newsletter has a lot of this manufacturing stuff in it as well, and you can sign up for that on our website. It's www.gofastcampers.com.
Awesome. Graham MacPherson, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the ReAutomated podcast. We're going to go ahead and link your website, the awesome case study that we have, and maybe the book and a few other things that we've referenced in this episode in the show notes. Really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me, Chris.